Welcome, everyone. It's noon, so we will go ahead and get started. People will continue to join, and that is totally fine. We're just going to do some introduction information here at the beginning. So thanks for joining us for today for this session of Keeping Kids Safe that is focused on social media. I'm Christy Ganya, a program manager from the Telehealth Rocks program. Telehealth Rocks is a federally funded program that focuses on school-based behavioral health. And we do this by working on social determinants, supporting school-based services, and telementoring trainings just like this one. We've got a few notes for you ahead of the session, so if we can go to the next slide, please. This session is being recorded and we will send it to you afterwards. Your microphone has been muted, but we definitely want to hear from you during the session, so feel free to use the chat or to unmute to ask questions. And then please make sure that your name is visible on your Zoom screen so that we can track attendance. We will be tracking attendance throughout the series, and we will send certificates of attendance after the series is over. So with that, I will hand it to Evelyn Nelson to get us started.
Christy, I appreciate the warm introduction and excited to talk about this topic today. I did just want to say we don't have any disclosures. And I just want to jump right in with our agenda today. So what we're hoping to cover is the what. So looking at some teen social media stats, the so what, looking at social media and teen development, and hopefully most of our time will be spent around what to do and looking at strategies, looking across schools, parents and broader community, youth-driven, and other strategies. And then we're fortunate to have a community case at the end, kind of talking about how this looks in practice and putting some of these ideas into action. We really want to hear from you today, so please do share in the chat and unmute. We're all learning about social media strategies together. So again, just eager to hear what you're seeing and with some of the strategies we talk about, things you've seen work and not work. We're going to start off with a poll. So I've not done this kind of poll before, so fingers crossed. Appreciate your patience as we give it a try. You're probably not expecting in a social media presentation for us to ask you to bring out your phone, but that's where we're going to start today. So if you're quickly able to, we'd like you to look at your day or daily average screen time. And then with the poll, you'll be looking at rounding that to the nearest hour. I just want to say this is only if it's convenient for you. You can always check your phone and phone usage after the fact as homework, or just to kind of get a read on your own usage after this presentation too.
And
So we'll go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say we will launch the poll in just a minute. We wanted to give you a chance to find your screen time, and on both Androids and iPhones, if you go to the settings and then apps on Android, it's apps and notification. There will be a screen time one that you can show, and then the iPhone visual is up on the screen.
Yeah, no worries. If you're finding it hard to find, we can always we'll just get a taste of folks in the audience and how much usage of folks are seeing. You'll see there, not for the poll, but in general, an extra credit area is looking at the number of daily average pickups. We'll talk later. That's an area I struggle more with even than the time on the daily usage. It looks like folks are having success. I appreciate those of you who've been able to look it up and contribute to the poll. So what we see, I think, is the majority of us are on our phones quite a bit. Now all this doesn't mean it's social media time on the phone, but it just gives an idea that we're going to be talking about teens where we'll see on the next slide really have a consistently high use of phone, but it's just a reminder that all of us adults, parents, teachers, community, we're also struggling and still learning about how do we balance the time we're on our phones as well as supporting youth. So let's put that in context. So the average amount Americans spend on their phone is 5 hours and 24 minutes a day. So we're pretty early in the day. So I think we're probably headed to about that average with what we were seeing with the poll information. So like we were saying, it sounds like just looking at the poll, we kind of have an average amount as others. Um, the I really struggle with how many times I check. We'll see that's fear of uh, being offline. So I checked yesterday and I had 165 checks, and that's even me after reading through all this important information um, about being online. So that's when I'm always trying to set goals and do a little bit better on. When we look at what teens don't want to live without, so looking at what they're often online using with social media, the top things right now are TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, and Instagram. I'd love to hear from you in the chat if you're hearing some others in your communities and with your students. I think where we have seen a shift in a fairly substantial shift is when we look at how many teens are on the internet almost constantly. And again, it's across social media and other things, but we see that almost half of teens are almost constantly online. And we'll talk about that's a real time hit. There's only so much time in the day. So if that much time is being spent online, it's challenging with some of the other developmental, academic, and psychosocial tasks that teen are also doing. So as part of that, so what? Um, we do see a national crisis and emergency around child, adolescent, and mental health. I know I see many returning faces on this echo, so it's many of the things we've talked about over time, really concerning trends with increasing depression, anxiety, and suicide risk with our youth. Social media is a piece of that. It's not the only one factor, but it is something we look at as a contributor to some of the national mental health crisis and challengings that we're facing. And then I really encourage folks to look at the Surgeon General's social media advisory. Um, I think it has some really good ideas and kind of uh, pointing towards some strategies. The Surgeon General has really disclosed his own struggle with loneliness and being online too much, as well as trying to balance the time that his younger children are online. So both of those are, I think, really helpful and motivators for what we're talking about today. So I want to share some of the literature around social media and youth mental health. Right now, we're still all learning together. There's mixed findings in the literature about what is the impact of social media, and it's really something that we see researchers continuously learning and trying to understand, which media, how much, why, what age, all those kinds of factors, and how does that figure in to the concerning symptoms we see around depression, anxiety, loneliness, and with this study, even increased ER visits for mental health. When we look more specifically about with the individual child, COIN did a long 8-year longitudinal study. So what that study showed is that with the individual youth, when they had increased use of social media, there was not an association observed with increased mental health issues. That doesn't that doesn't mean it's not important for us still to be looking at and understanding, but it just kind of gives a context that we really need to be figuring out which youth are at risk. What we know so far is that youth with marginalized identities are at most risk for poor outcomes. The other piece that we're seeing is that relationship may be U-shaped and not linear. So the idea that those students who are online for an exceptional amount of time and those who are online for a really little amount of time, that both of those may see increased risk around mental health concerns. It's kind of the bell-shaped curve that folks are used to. So it's really those tails of the bell shape that we have most concern. That's called the Goldilocks effect. I thought that was a clever way to talk about it, with either too much or too little, and both of those things being dissimilar from peers that may put folks at additional risk. So when we think about social media use and mental health, I don't think this is much of a surprise to folks. We're really seeing things are multifactorial and depend on the amount and type of social media use, the type of use. So some of that is it in secret? Is it out in the open? Um, you know, it depends some on the types of sites and um, those sorts of things. And then really the characteristics of the individual youth. All the things that we talk about with mental health in general and health in general also play into what's the impact of social media. So the biology and genetics, child experiences, history of trauma and stress, the environment, family, community, um, positive strengths and support also play in on some of that can buffer the impact of social media, and what are the overall social relationships. So to say that another way, I know Robert's really been helping us advance some of more a public health lens when we're looking at mental health, and social media. Um, so with that lens, we really are looking at the social media outcomes being dependent on the socioeconomic factors, the physical environment, health behaviors, and healthcare access. So that's kind of from the big picture view and some of the research. I want to talk a little bit about the so what in terms of adolescent task and developmental tasks. As a child psychologist, we're always trying to think about, what is the same and, what's part of that adolescent growth process and what is different and what might set up for risk. So the real central thing with adolescence is as youth are trying to ask, who am I? And doing a lot of thinking and searching around identity. So the social media is a real draw with that because it's a chance to try on a lot of different identities, often in an anonymous way. So that kind of informs some of the teen real draw to social media. Um, and also for self-expression and comparison, which of course we see in the non-online world, but some of the things that and reasons that teens are so drawn to some of the social media is that kind of normative process of self-expression and comparison. Teens themselves report, a knowledge and feeling addicted and seeing negative impacts of social media. We see that, it's always been a draw with teens kind of to look at a reinforcement and friends and likes. So social media is kind of taking that to an extreme where it's the idea that social media is like a media super peer and really kind of giving that concrete and immediate um, peer influence. we'll talk a minute about, that's a real setup for addiction when it goes to the extreme. Teens describe a tension between, wanting to share posts that make them look good and create this curated image online, versus wanting to share authentic self-expression. Of course, I don't think it's a surprise with the authentic self-expression and social media, we tend to see better outcomes, where with a real focus on trying to curate and make everything perfect, that's more associated with the not as good outcomes. I think with this generation especially, we see an interest and a value around authentic self-expression. So it's also an opportunity to look at that more positive side of social media use. We also see mixed impacts on key areas around identity, with relationships and sexuality. Continuing, looking at the identity area and just really looking at some of the pros and cons of social media use. With the negatives, we see an overuse and displacement of healthy activities. Again, it's that idea that there's only 24 hours in a day. So if many of those hours are taking up with online and social media, there's real concerns about poor sleep, around sedentary behavior, and just limited in-person relationships and socializing and play, and missing out on some of those activities that also are important with adolescent development. There's a difficulty tolerating boredom and challenges with self-regulation associated with social media use. There's a lot of course, comparison to others, which can lead to low self-esteem. There's an idea of being compelled to be connected or fear of being offline, as well as fear of missing out or FOMO. And then there's just, on the negative side, really feeling overwhelmed by drama. So I know, most of us couldn't miss here in the last couple weeks, there's been a lot of social media drama around Travis Kelce and, Taylor Swift. So those kind of big dramas, but what we're talking about here really is more those local dramas and seeing that play out on social media and just really feeling overwhelmed by, encounters online and social media with classmates or other folks people know, and then how does that play into then seeing them in person and having some of the drama, and also we'll see cyberbullying. How does that kind of go from the online world to how children and students are trying to function every day in the classroom? There's also on the other side of the coin positives associated with social media. So there's the idea of social connectedness and social capital. So there were really two hypotheses around that idea of connecting with peers. Um, so one is the idea that the rich get richer, and then one is the poor get richer. So those ideas mean that, people who are really good at social connection already, um, people who have that real strength, we do see that people who have that strength in person, that translates online. But in general, folks who also are challenged with some of those skills, they can still increase some of the relationship and social connectedness. That's in general. It doesn't mean that some folks aren't hurt or that some folks don't have that experience. But in general, we see that both are true. There's greater social connectedness, but the relationships in general have diminished quality. There's also opportunities for social connections across distances. So ability to connect with friends and family who are in different areas of the country or the world is a plus of social media. Um, Being able to share creative self-expression is a positive of social media and something that can be leaned into. And then there's opportunities for engagement and causes and new ideas and some of those things that you see, youth really interested in, and sometimes it's an outlet and a way to explore those areas. We also see social media figuring into another task of adolescents, and that's around autonomy and seeking. But we see a lot of risk with that, with risky online communities. Um, I wanted to put one brain science reminder in here. So kind of the draw to the thrill seeking and some of those things, it goes along with what's going on in the adolescent brain. So, it's a huge time and a often work in progress where we see from that early adolescence to later, the brain's working on myelinization and pruning and specialization. So this is that idea that how do we get some really super smart teens who make such poor and not so good choices? So it's just a recognition that some of the risks with social media go along with that, with the brain still in process. And that's why we're talking together about some of the needs for protections and other things around social media. Cyberbullying is one such risk. 1 in 6 students report being cyberbullied. Um, there's the idea that that's often because in the social media context, there may be anonymous bullying, um, and the feel like, I'm gonna get away with this because it's online. Um, there's links, of course, with cyberbullying and negative mental health outcomes, the anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicide concerns we've talked about. Real risk around cyberbullying include early smartphone ownership, as well as really thinking about bully victims. That's those who've both been bullies and been bullied. We look at that as a particularly risky group for poor outcomes. We do, of course, worry and think about how to look towards safety around contagion. So that may be suicide contagion. I know that our headquarters colleagues are going to present another Keeping Kids Safe echo around suicide. We'll see here in a second too. I want to reshare the 988 slide, and just a reminder that we have many excellent resources in the state through headquarters. There's risk of non-suicidal self-injury contagion. I know, again, we're looking at that in a later echo series session. And then there's contagion concerns reported around self-diagnosis and illness narratives. So that becomes more a problem when it's a dialogue, but it's not paired with encouragement to seek help and to seek experts. And there's real concerns around that where it's more taking the influencer as an expert. Um, and we'll see that one of the solutions talked about quite a bit around social media is trying to help teens differentiate between what does an influencer look like and know versus what does an expert know. So um, again, those are all big challenging issues that I know we're all struggling with to look at how we support youth. Eating disorders is another risky online community. Again, especially risky because it's discouraging folks who are in distress from seeking help. The social media and body image, and that's a mixed area. Um, on the concerning side, we do see a lot of stereotyped roles and never good enough. I think the stat was up to 90% like posting either the kind of more stereotyped female or male selfie shots. But on the other hand, we also see some social media content coming out around making media manipulation explicit. So making it clear, what does photoshopping look like? Are these real images or are they manipulated images? There's a really interesting Dove campaign around that. And there's some good literature coming out about that, that if you use social media to make some of that manipulation explicit, that you do see, knowing it does have some protective effects with how students react in terms of depression, anxiety, and other symptoms. And then finally, there's more this idea of a body positive sites. So sites that are more trying to advance body positive content to increase diversity and inclusiveness by rejecting harmful appearance ideals. This is just a good reminder of the 988 resources, especially as we're talking about the suicide risks. So we've talked about the what and the so what. So I want to now share some of the national ideas around how we can help students and youth around social media use. A lot of these are national ideas, so I really hope that to hear from you all in the chat about what are you seeing on the ground with that youth that you're working with. Some of these strategies, as they're implemented on the ground, are going to work, and some are going to be not as helpful. So again, if you tried some of these strategies or have other strategies, really welcome hearing that in the chat. One thing that's almost universally suggested with schools and other youth serving systems is the idea of social media literacy. So this is the idea that if we share with teens kind of how does social media work, how does digital design really can be used in a not healthy way, with some of the addictive potential, where social media has been driven by algorithms that prioritize drama and keeping the most eyes on content, and having that realization that um, it's the same thing with other really kinds of pleasurable behaviors, where if you get a lot of likes or if you get a lot of friends, it's having that impact on the brain. But just with other behaviors that are sometimes associated with addiction, um, that impact on the brain can lead to less healthy things and less healthy use of social media. Um, a lot of these strategies talk about media balance. So trying to look at how to use the good in social media, some of those positives we talked about, looking at what things make you feel better and not worse. And then trying to look at digital balance and what else is going on that is used for positives and reinforcement, and being really planful and trying to look for that balance. There's discussions about cyberbullying and preparing students with skills to look for the signs and practicing responses around cyberbullying. There's information about privacy and learning how to positively shape one's digital footprint and manage privacy, and really just considering the profitability motive for personal information and marketing of the social media companies. There's a suggestion that a strategy is to really inform youth and talk with youth about advertisements and learning how to identify and cope with social media advertising, trying to differentiate, again, what's fake and what's real, and giving students skills around that. Another area is, again, phishing and spam. How do you identify that and take action? And then again, the idea of recognizing influencers versus experts. I wanted to suggest, again, I'd love to hear if there's curriculums folks are using. Um, that's again really in its infancy, trying to figure out what works and doesn't work. The teensandtech.org, they do have a curriculum that's used with students. Um, and I think it has some really interesting components around teaching these kinds of things. Other successful school strategies that have been reported in the literature, one is just the recognition, like with many areas, school personnel have strong relationship with students. So it's like other areas where the school personnel are often modeling and reinforcing more the positive things through their strong relationship with students. There's ideas around teaching these social media management skills as a entree to career skills. So, learning to balance social media, it's something we have to do in school. It's something we have to do when we get in the work world. So, thinking about how these skills kind of fit in with career skills as well. There's ideas around self-reflection, which is, I know we started with that exercise. So trying to look at awareness of social media use, kind of thinking about that as digital metacognition and trying to be more intentional around what we do. Um, Looking at behavior change, advancing this kind of balance. So the literature talks about teaching and reinforcing on-device strategies. Some things like turning off push notifications, those bells and bings, they really draw our attention and then sometimes can get us drawn into social media use. Looking at off-device strategies, so scheduling positive free time, getting that on our calendars, and making that a lifelong skill. And then connecting students and families to resources overall to help with their overall social determinants of health needs and health and mental health needs. Um, the idea that being healthier overall also helps with some of what we're aiming for with healthier digital balance. And then there's some discussion just around, there's a lot of legal and civics hot topics in the social media area. This one that was suggested just reminded, I can think of a debater or someone in that area or civics, more looking at how does some of the civics area impact social media and health. This particular area, looking at, what's how do you balance age gating or having expectations about when youth and students are online versus some First Amendment rights. So again, a lot of hot topics in that area. I want to switch gears now and just talk about some resources for overall adult strategies to support youth. The American Psychological Association has released this health advisory on social media, and it's really it's a overview, but I think it puts in one place a lot of the good things we're trying to promote at schools and in broader community and households. So, encouraging functions that promote healthy socialization, while at the same time discouraging functions that are not suitable for the child's level maturity, monitoring use for early adolescence, and just really, I'm a parent of two teens, so really looking at how do we balance um, the use, but also being in the know about some of the use, and being in the know then helps us teach some of the skills. Um, Minimizing exposure to and removing content depicting illegal or maladaptive behaviors, trying to minimize exposure to and remove content that promotes discrimination, violence, and hate. Um, Trying to look at daily use, and this is trying to get at, when does it go from that line of um, really needing some extra help or extra supports in managing social media use. So 3 of the questions suggested are, is it a student who's tried to reduce screen time and just they're not being able to be successful? Has the student or youth gone to extreme measures to try to retain access to social media? And is the screen time interfering with the use of the roles and responsibilities? Similarly, we talked about, limiting use that interferes with sleep and activity, trying to limit use that encourages social comparison, um, doing the things we talked about a little bit earlier about trying to advance social media literacy, and trying to make that a process and helping teens get the skills before they're spending a lot of time online. And then I think we've seen that throughout this presentation. There's just a lot of needs to better understand what's the youth experience and the community experience of social media, and how do we maximize the positive and limit the negative. I want us in this the didactics portion. I really find this a hopeful slide. It's really one of my favorite social media movement groups. It's a student created and student led group called Blog Off. So the idea of it was founded by two teens who are now 20 and in college, and their idea was, how can we ourselves as teens look at more hitting that balance? They have a new back to school screen time improvement guide with a lot of really good ideas, some of which we mentioned today. A lot of what they talk about is setting goals and working together with friends to achieve those goals. Their newest strategy is phone down and fork up. So the idea that, instead of using social media, we're instead going to get together as friends and have a meal together. They really focus on the creating the good habits, not just telling you what not to do, but looking for how to reinforce the good things to do together. And then finally, they look a lot at student advocacy and sharing the student voice and experience to inform how we all as communities help students. I'll share a few resources. I really hope to hear from you all in the chat. If there's resources that you all are using to help students, that would be awesome, and appreciate any of those resources. And with that, I'll hand it off to Steve. I really looking forward to the social media case study exam.
Very good. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for having me today. It's good to talk about this sort of mini project we decided to embark upon after getting some data ourselves. My name is Steve Denny. I work at Fort County Mental Health Center. We're located in Southeast Kansas, serve primarily rural frontier areas. We're also a certified community behavioral health clinic, which is a lot of things, a comprehensive model, but it also really focuses on the use of data to drive and understand what you're doing and to be more effective at the care you deliver. The main reason that we decided to do a little bit of a mini evaluation, just for the record, this is not any sort of a research study. There's no control group, nothing of that nature. This is just something we decided to embark upon internally with that data-driven mindset. There was really two reasons we decided to do that. The main reason was that we have seen over the last 10 to 15 years or so a spike in youth suicides and suicide attempts. And I've had the unfortunate assignment, and I've made the assignment way too many times in our small communities for our staff to go do a debriefing and support session for local schools after a suicide. And we serve small communities. I can't get into case details or anything like that, but I can tell you it has happened far more than I think it should. One is too many, but to have multiple suicides in a small school district or multiple suicides in our region, which is a rural frontier area, it's a problem. And what we've found is that social media, while not always a direct cause necessarily, it's always played a factor one way or the other. It always involves, it seemed to always be in the either in the background, or maybe sometimes it was an actual trigger if there was a bullying event or something like that. But there was definitely always that connection. The second thing that really piqued my curiosity, I don't know how many of you have seen the Netflix series, The Social Dilemma, but it's a series put on by Netflix, documentary about the buildup and growth of social media. Some of the original authors of things like Twitter and Facebook, and people who were executives of those organizations talking about the unintended consequences. And there was this really powerful slide that in that documentary documentary that shows, you know, the spike in youth suicide in conjunction with the growth and use of social media. And it was one of those moments where I was like, whoa, this is something that we need to really start paying attention to. So November of last year, we decided to do a better job of assessing whether or not social media is a factor on the children and adolescents that we serve. So we built a couple questions into our intake document, just asking and assessing, do you have, you know, does your child have social media access, or if it's an older teenager, do you yourself have access? And if so, what type of impact does it have on your mood, your life experiences? And our sole purpose was to gather data and try to identify any trends or concerns that we could communicate to stakeholders, and, you know, gives our therapists, providers, case managers, peer providers some immediate information to act upon. If they say, yes, it is, we can address that immediately in our treatment planning and treatment approaches. And what we found is that there is probably something very reflective of what Evelyn just communicated about. There are a variety of potential impacts. What you can't see and what I cannot show is I have a list of just, you know, an Excel spreadsheet full of qualitative comments from parents and adolescents. And I can't share those for confidentiality and privacy, you know, to the group. But what I can do is quote a few of them, you know, and keep things obviously private. I wouldn't do anything to disclose or identify any individual. But here's just a few of the comments that I'm seeing here. This is in response to the second question. Does social media have a negative impact on your anxiety, mood, or other life experiences? And here's one teenager saying, yes, some TikToks actually help, but others impact me more negatively. We have another one here saying, yes. This is from a mother who was upset because the teenager is speaking with strangers online and not being honest about them. And this is just on Pinterest. Patient mother has taken the phone away as a result. Here's an interesting comment. The teenager identified that YouTube teaches me a lot about different mental health disorders, but at times I convince myself that I have those mental health disorders. I think Evelyn specifically addressed that earlier. Having my friends online can be helpful, but then when they are MIA, when friends are MIA, I become anxious and I want to know what's going on with them. Here's another one from a mom. TikTok is the devil for teens. That's a direct quote from a mom. Here's a teenager saying, I get angry. It makes me angry over stuff that doesn't even matter. And just a couple more here. I mostly compare myself to other people, and then I feel like I can't live up to them. And I'll wrap up with this one. The individual stated that it has made things harder on her life, but doesn't really know how to answer whether or not it's a negative impact. It does make me feel more anxious and depressed. So you kind of hear some really clear themes of yes, it is harmful. You hear some ambivalence. You hear the I'm self-diagnosing myself based off of YouTube videos, which is pretty dangerous. You know, you have behavioral implications, you have mood, all of that is showing up. It's a variety of different things that can be impacted, different areas of life. But what we have found, as I mentioned previously, is that it was a factor in way too many youth suicides that we were involved with in the past several years. So as I gathered the data, and as we gathered the data and started to learn more, there were some opportunities to help make stakeholders aware. I think that's the main thing I was asked to speak about today. Earlier this spring, I was asked to testify as part of the U.S. Senate Help Committee. It was a bipartisan committee chaired by Senator Marshall and a senator from Massachusetts whose name is Ed Markey. And so you have two people on both sides of the aisle chairing a committee to talk about mental health. And it wasn't just youth mental health, but that was certainly a topic. And I can tell you that right now, politically speaking, there is a lot of bipartisan concern about our youth and youth mental health because they're hearing it from lots of different directions. But what I was able to pull from our initial cohort of data is that of our admissions we do on adolescents, which I think I defined from 12 to 18, 36% of those, so that's just over 1 in 3, are at risk for suicide, self-harm. That's one of the reasons. That so out of every 10 people that walk in our door, 3 to 4 are at some sort of risk for suicide or self-harm. And of those individuals, 35% of those individuals report that social media is a negative factor in relationship to their mental wellness. Now, once again, that's not a a research study that has control groups. That's just data from our internal individuals we serve telling us that this is a real thing that we're dealing with, and it's continuing to be a factor. I was looking at this a couple of websites before we got on here, and I was looking at the history of the car. And if you look at 1900 to 1930, when vehicles were growing, there weren't really any traffic rules yet. 75% of accidents that resulted in a death were pedestrians kind of walking on the street, and the vast majority of those were children. And I think about this in relationship to social media. I think we have this new unprecedented technology that has, some good things, but also has some things that put safety at risk. And we're still figuring out how to manage it and how to put it into practice in a way that doesn't put our youth at risk. And many of the techniques and strategies that Evelyn mentioned are really important. As far as the direction we're headed, obviously, we're going to continue to evaluate and examine what does this mean in terms of some of the safety interventions and planning around how do we intervene in a meaningful way, and how do we work with parents, how do we work with teens themselves, how do we work with members of the community. We're still figuring that out, and I think it'll continue to develop as things change. But what I can say is that just being aware of it and starting some initial strategies to intervene has been meaningful, and I think it will continue to be meaningful as we go down that pathway. I think that the opportunity to use technology and data in a meaningful way is the possibilities are pretty wide open. I'm just looking at this group of comments I read earlier. You could probably run some of that through some sort of AI evaluation tool and come to some conclusions. How do we identify people at risk? Are there any trends in terms of diagnoses and age ranges? There's a lot of things we could evaluate. But for now, from our perspective, the start is let's be aware and let's intervene as quickly as we can, because we know that it has been a factor in some really unfortunate outcomes. Some outcomes that are going to have lifelong effects. And I know Evelyn mentioned the contagion factor. That's always been a thing with youth suicide and with suicide in general. But I think this new technology just really amplifies and gives a lot more opportunity for things like that to happen. So, beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions and speak to anything else in particular. There's a lot more we could talk about. But that was this is kind of phase one of what we've done with this data, and we'll continue to use it in new ways as we learn more. And we might decide to track additional data related to social media and digital health. And like Evelyn, I'm the father of 2 teenagers. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. And as I was checking my screen time, for the poll, I went ahead and hopped on my son's, because I have control of one of my sons. So I wanted to check out his screen time, see how he was doing. So a little higher than I'd like, but not terrible. So we'll talk about that tonight. But I think as a parent, it is so important for us to be aware of what's happening, where they're going, and setting restrictions in a lot of cases, and making sure that they are not into something that is very difficult to pull out of. And I've unfortunately seen that some pretty difficult situations in this work as a result of failure or lack of oversight at times of things that probably could have been prevented. So I'll pause, and if there's any questions or additional comments, I'm happy to answer them.
start off with just one question, Steve, as we're waiting for other questions to come in. Did you find the youth that in answering questions about social media and use um, uh, pretty forthcoming and willing to talk about that topic?
Yes, I more so than I expected. And it, I have a lot of comments here and a lot of data, and most of them are in that 13 to 16 age range, which is where we were really hoping to get good data. So yes, more so. And I would say a little more insight, when someone says that I hop on YouTube and I see these, different videos about mental health conditions, and then I diagnose myself as a result. That is really good insight for a 14 to 16-year-old. So I think there is certainly some awareness of it for someone to say that, when you know I negatively evaluate myself. I compare myself to others, and it makes me feel bad. I'm paraphrasing, but I think so. I think a lot of our youth really recognize this is not something that's good at times. There's also a lot of comments defending it too, by the way. I didn't go through those, but there's a lot of those. Here's a question from Angie. Do you want me to go ahead and answer that, Evelyn?
Great, I
Asking about,
appreciate it.
yeah, so it's a great question. So do we see any differences between rural America and the metro areas regarding teen suicide rates? Nationally, I would need to dig in a little bit deeper. I can tell you that in Kansas, what we are experiencing has not been unique to us. So it's a rural, urban frontier. I mean, we've seen it in just about every community size. The challenge with rural is that when you think about the contagion factor and you think about how easy it is to be influenced, I think the risk is a little bit higher. I'm sure that some of you who are Generation X or maybe a little bit older have said something like, "I'm glad we didn't have social media back when I was in high school." Has anyone ever said something like that? I know I certainly have. Because when we were, I mean, a lot of the negative things, bullying and drama and a lot of the pressures, they were there, but at least in the evenings, we could go home and disconnect, and on the weekends, but just to have that constantly feeding at you, I think that's not unique to anyone. And the fact that someone from a small little town here in Southeast Kansas can immediately connect to a much larger community, or some sort of website that has some sort of graphic or violent, or some sort of video depicting suicide. I mean, that is instant access, and I think that's what we're still trying to figure out how to manage. So that was a long answer to a simple question. I haven't, I think it's been pretty widespread, but I do think it can be more intense in smaller communities, just because there's fewer, sometimes a lot of times fewer resources and fewer places easier to connect with other peers who might be struggling with the same issues without the right type of intervention.
Please do feel free to unmute and ask any questions that may be on your mind.
I have a question. What would be any recommendations for like watchdog type apps or something that you would like that you use for your kids, or I don't know, like something that we can, like I have a bunch of kids too, and I want to keep them safe, and I just am not, like, I almost have to use my phone to them sometimes to, they're more computer literate than myself. So any apps that you would recommend or software?
Did you want to take that one, Evelyn? You want me to take it? I mean, I'm not an expert. I can tell you that on my kids' phone, I use their accounts are set up under my Apple ID, and I have all of those restrictions in place. I can see all of their activity. Now, as my daughter gets older, I'm less and less concerned, because eventually that's going to be her deal, right? But I check it regularly with my 14-year-old son for multiple reasons. But there are a lot of apps out there. I don't have specific names right now. There is a couple good ones. There's one that's called Accountable to You that can send some warnings and flags if people access certain content. But there's a thousand out there in terms of resources.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I'll suggest that log off resource that we shared a few minutes ago, and we can make sure we send that out with the slides and notes for this session. It talked about several apps, both to help on the parent and caregiver side, as well as the youth themselves being able to monitor and recognize those kind of patterns. I'll share just as a parent, I think, we talked with our children as they got the privilege of smartphone ownership and we shared, we're going to be monitoring this. It wasn't any surprise that we were monitoring it. So that was useful for our family. It doesn't mean it's going to work for every family.
I thought of one
I
more.
appreciate all the questions. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say there's another one called Clean Router that is oriented around Wi-Fi, and it's a router that attaches to your Wi-Fi that lets you know if a certain website or with violent content is accessed. And they also now have a phone version. I haven't used that one, but we use the Clean Router in our home, and that's been a good thing. We get warnings from time to time of like, hey, and which allows the opportunity for conversation. A lot of times it's nothing, like it pays pretty sensitive, but it has been good to promote awareness.
Turn it over to you, Christy. I really appreciate the good questions, and we'd really love to continue to hear even after the presentation and case today. We're glad to look and share information if you have questions later on.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Yvonne, for your presentation, and Steve for sharing your case study. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you here next month, November 1st at noon, for a discussion of substance use. We will send the slides and the recording and follow-up materials to your email. Please give us a day or so to process those. They should be out hopefully tomorrow. We'll also post them on the Telehealth Rocks website where our past resources are, and that link will be in the chat as well as on our Facebook page. So lots of places for you to find those. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.